So, everybody, welcome to another exciting episode of Data Exposed, this time from SQL Server Conference in Germany. I'm your host, Gabi Münster, and today's topic is SSAS, the xVelocity show, or Tabular now. And I'd like to welcome today's guest for a hopeful, interesting discussion round, and I'd like to start with a short introduction. So maybe you'll introduce yourself.
I have the microphone, so I might as well start. Yeah, hello, my name is Markus Raths from Ceteris. We're a Microsoft Gold partner for business intelligence. We do nothing else but Microsoft BI projects, and I also do training videos for Video to Brain and other platforms.
Hello, my name is Gerhard Brückel. I'm from the PM1 AG. We are focused on BI and data warehousing and also advanced analytics. Microsoft Data Platform MVP and also Analysis Services Maestro, and also Analysis Services is my personal passion. And I'm really looking forward to the discussions.
So my name is Casper de Jong. I'm a PM on the Power BI team / Microsoft BI team. Worked on Analysis Services for the majority of my career at Microsoft. So same as interested in the discussion.
Okay, great. So what I would like to start is, how is your perception of the customer demand at the moment for tabular projects actually? Do you have customers asking for that? Do you advise them?
We are a consulting company, and most customers usually come up to us and say, okay, well, we need we need a cube or an analytical system, and usually it's up to us, but we recommend them, of course. There are some special use cases where I would say I'd always go for multidimensional, and there are some other use cases where I'd say, okay, better always go with Tabular. But for the vast majority of the cases, I'd say you can do either. It's just for specific cases you should, there are some strengths and weaknesses of both technologies. You just need to know those, and then you can give a very good opinion on what the customer should do in his case.
Okay.
Well, I'm surprised that many customers at the time, they don't ask for Tabular. I mean, those who are technically very interested say, oh, this is something new, shouldn't we try this? And then I can explain whether they should try this or maybe not. But they're not actually actively asking for it. Maybe this is because of the license changes for SQL 2016. It's just done very recently that now you can have tabular models in standard edition as well. And still, standard edition is for many customers something that they'd love to start with, and then see where we go from there. And now the design decision is open. Even if you have standard edition, you can do tabular or multidimensional. So there's more discussion coming now. But from my perception, a lot of people that already have multidimensional, they stick with it. And if you have new projects, you got to think about it, as you said, and then make a wise decision, hopefully.
Okay. So you wouldn't say that in the market or in the broader community, people are regarding Tabular as a replacement for multidimensional?
I think the perception that Tabular is going to replace multidimensional is mainly coming from the fact that there have been a lot of investments in Tabular in the recent years by Microsoft, which were also made very public. Whereas on the other hand, if you take multidimensional, there haven't been any major changes since basically its release in 2005 of the new BI semantic model. And so, of course, a lot of customers get the impression that there is no investment and that Microsoft is not advancing multidimensional anymore, which is not true, because there are still a lot of things happening in the background, doing internal performance tuning and stuff. I'm sure Casper could talk longer on this. Tabular is the new one. It's the newer technology, but I wouldn't say that it's going to replace multidimensional, because there are, as I said before, so many use cases which just are not feasible to do in Tabular at the moment, from my personal point of view.
And I think I totally agree, but I think the main point is, and to the more investments happening in Tabular, is mostly because it's also feeding Power BI. So a lot of the investments that are actually done, like SQL Server 2016, the majority of the things there were actually not done by the NL services team. They were done by the Power BI team. And all of that was taken and moved into the Tabular engine. So the only thing we did in the Tabular engine is, okay, some things that actually make sense for more enterprise scenarios. Those are the things that we want tackling with the Tabular model and the enterprise customers. So yes, there's more investment in Tabular models, but it's because there are more developers working on it. And for multidimensional, we actually did a lot of things like better drill through for Excel. The biggest thing that we've done in years is probably allowing you to, also a license change, by the way, is allowing you to connect with Power BI to multidimensional models. Yeah. That was a major undertaking, but we pulled it off, and that's also now a standard edition, where in the past that you always needed to have enterprise edition. But I mean, in general, the story is similar to what these guys were saying as well. In the majority of the cases, we would think Tabular is better to get started with, unless you are already familiar with multidimensional, or or you know, or you already have existing cubes. But and especially, I mean, the way forward, and I think the writing is on all the walls already as well, is we think this grow-up story from a Power BI desktop file to move over into an Allosaurus file would be like an easier way for you to get started with a model. Instead of, imagine that you have to build a Power BI desktop file, you start it easy out, and then, oh, I have to rebuild it to Tabular in multidimensional. That doesn't make a lot of sense. So that grow-up story is definitely one of the things. And actually one of the changes, why we made the license change as well, is because we got the same feedback. Like, it's an easy choice. Like, I pay, I don't know exactly what the numbers are, but like, I pay $15,000 for an enterprise edition if I want to go Tabular, and I pay $3,000 if I want to do multidimensional standard. Well, that's an easy choice.
Yeah.
No, you made it more difficult.
So now, at least you can actually go ahead and say, okay, for the standard SKU, we can also choose for Tabular. And especially, yeah, again, when we start talking more about, okay, you have a Power BI desktop file, I just want to use that as the starting point. I mean, we were usually successful with that with Power Pivot, right? You take a Power Pivot file and you move it over, and we want to make that more seamless. And especially, of course, when we start talking about Azure and Power BI, and like with the pushing the button, you move it over into Allosaurus. So we get both. A lot of people who are very passionate about multidimensional models, and they spend their life doing this. And again, it's a huge, powerful platform, and we still keep investing in it. We're still adding new features, but I think Tabular, we get the most things out of it because that's an easier grow-up story. Power BI is built on top of it, so I mean, yeah, that's a lot to it.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, but that's actually, I think, what we all think about it. But it's good to see that, at least in our perception in the market, it's not seen differently.
Oh,
but
yeah. One thing that I did want to mention is that even for multidimensional, we now have an Allosaurus in Azure, Tabular, but the multidimensional one is also on the roadmap. So, and again, the reason why Tabular is first is because, I mean, we almost already had it running, right? Power BI is and tabular models in the cloud. Now it's, of course, it's a different infrastructure, different Azure infrastructure, but we had so much more experience that it's easier for us to start with Tabular compared to multidimensional, where we have to actually start from scratch.
Yeah. So if you already raised that topic, what is your expectation for the future? How will especially Azure Analysis Services make a difference in how the technology is used in the future?
Well, my take on this is more the way that I think data is going to be used, especially in Azure, is like, we all see these like microservices and all those hype words today. Is like, you will have your data sitting in some blob in Azure, and then you pick what you need. Before it actually gets to the end users using Power BI. There's a lot of steps in the middle. And whatever you need, like, you probably won't want to have an Allosaurus talking directly to the blob storage, because it's not safe data. It will change, and then you'll have problems. So maybe you want to have something in the middle. But I think in general, the idea is an Allosaurus has a place there as the semantic model. Like you make it easier for your business users to connect to known data and make sure it's performant. You actually can trust the data, and it's easy to use and navigate. You don't have to write the inner joins. Like semantic model is where the piece of it is. And we will keep investing in direct query, and we will keep investing in keeping an eye out on all those scenarios where maybe at one point we are only using an Allosaurus as a semantic model. Mm-hmm. But now at this moment in time, we don't see the other products, none of them, not HANA, not anything, be as performant as an Allosaurus, where it goes to a lot of concurrent users at the same time, being able to do analytic queries. So it's going to be the semantic layer of Azure. That's the way I see it. And for Power BI users and those, and what's under it can be anything. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's Azure Data Lake. Maybe it's a SQL DW. Maybe it's a SQL Server database. Or maybe it's even directly pointing it to a blob storage. But yeah, that's what I think.
So like, I'd say that hosting analysis services on Azure as a platform as a service was, from my point of view, just the logical next step, because you always had the upgrade path in like some years ago when you had like this personal BI, team BI with SharePoint, and enterprise BI with analysis services. Now you have like Power BI for personal BI and team BI, and then you have to host it somewhere. And as Power BI is already hosted as a service, it just makes sense to also have like analysis services as a service. Because if you take your Power BI model and you want to make it enterprise ready, if you don't have analysis services on Azure, you would have to host the VM where you host your model, right? So I think that's a very important part here, also for the whole BI story for Microsoft. And yeah, I'm looking forward for all the other features that are probably coming to Azure Analysis Services, maybe multidimensional if you say it's on the roadmap. I'm very happy to see it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to this.
Yeah, what you should definitely not forget as a feedback from the real world outside is we must always remember that almost any company has to do some planning, some budgeting, some forecasting, this type of applications, which is up to now only possible in multidimensional. And if you do financial reporting, you have accounts dimensions, it's a completely different word, and you literally break your fingers doing it in a tabular model. Yeah, I won't say it's impossible because I get paid for sometimes making it possible, but it's just too complicated. And for this financial stuff, it's the first thing I ask people. I say, are you going to do a lot of financial reporting? Do you want your calculated structures in a parent-child style? And then when they say, yes, this is all we want, and then we want to do this planning scenario here, and think about the large amount of third-party software that does planning and budgeting and so on, and they're all based on multidimensional, and they will stay there as long as Microsoft supports it. They will keep using multidimensional as their OLAP platform. So it's definitely here to stay.
Mm. Yeah. I see it the same, but what you actually mentioned is something I would just like to talk about. You both said before, we are all doing consulting, we are going to the customers, we're recommending which solution might be the best for the use case. And you just described the use case, we all know where multidimensional actually would in almost every case be the better choice. But are there different use cases where you would say, for example, typical use cases you experience where you, for example, would say Tabular would be a good choice, or it depends, or do you have those use cases?
Well, it always depends, as you all know. So like taking the most, let's say, obvious use cases for, or where I do the main distinguish between whether I go for multidimensional or tabular, is usually like distinct counts. Distinct counts just perform way better in tabular. Also, for example, if you don't have a clean star schema, so where tabular is much better because it's not as stare as multidimensional is. Because for multidimensional, you more or less need a proper star schema. And another very important thing is many-to-many. So if you have like complex many-to-many stuff, I'd also rather go for tabular because, as I said, like it's much more flexible in terms of of your data model structure, and things like the many-to-many are much easier with Tabular, and also much better performing than a multidimensional.
Yeah, I mean, the use cases are described pretty well, but I think the majority of the things, and that's one of the most important things that we see, is it's just easier to get started with Tabular. Like, if you can choose from scratch, just start with Tabular, because I mean, you can be up and running in an hour. Like multidimensional, you can probably also get, but then you need to tune the hell out of it afterwards. Which is also good in certain scenarios. And I think the other important thing is, and that's something interesting that we have seen within Microsoft, for example, and the actual users, like we're not just a software development firm, we also have a lot of actual finance users sitting inside of Microsoft using our products. And the interesting thing that we've seen is, and time again, we came across these guys, that they are running the dashboard for the chief financial officer for Microsoft and his 2,000 employees, and he's running home some tabular model. And this guy has an Excel background, and he's an Excel guy, and he knows Excel. And he was able to pull this thing off. And that is a much more natural grow-up story from the billions of Excel users that we have, and maybe not all of them will be able to set up a tabular model, but the grow-up story for these guys is also much more, it's a natural process. If you're interested in this area, if you can go into this direction, where multidimensional is just very alien compared to tabular for the Excel user. Like, it's just tables and relationships and DAX measures, and they're familiar with it. So that's another interesting approach that I have personally seen, like especially the departmental guys who just, they just set something up and Excel a bit, and they just go around and they make it work. And that is, pretty interesting, if you ask me.
But what would interest me is, are there, let's say, any criteria where you still would say better use multidimensional?
Yeah, these guys are saying exactly the financial, unary operators, scope assignments. I mean, they're all interesting scenarios, and one of the things, you probably have it on the list, but all of these things we're looking at to adding to Tabular at one point. Like today, the most interesting thing to, like, we have worked on Tabular model mostly as a self-service BI tool for the last couple of years. It started out as Power Pivot, then it became Power BI, and we shipped a SQL release in the middle. Like, and we just took whatever we had and we put it inside of Visual Studio and we shipped it. And we were all the same team. The Power Pivot team was the same team as the Tabular model team when we started. Now it's a different story, because now we have Power BI team, and we actually have an Allosaurus team. And those are two different teams. So this release, we did some things, like, for example, one of the most important things, like the NUMA optimizations that we just recently did for Tabular models in Service Pack 1, but also some of the other capabilities that we have added to the Tabular model in this release. And what you will see more and more is that we have more enterprise capabilities. That team is dedicated to adding those enterprise capabilities to the Tabular model. And then you will start thinking more about, okay, how can we do calculated members in Tabular? Because that's a nightmare today. Like, you have this measure explosion of 200, 300, 400 measures if you want to do year to date, quarter to date, all of these things. It all works, and there are lots of tricks you can do to think about it and fix it. But I mean, wouldn't it just be better to have something similar to multidimensional as calculated members? And those are things that we are looking at, and things that we want to start addressing as well. But we won't take one-to-one what we have in multidimensional. Another example is like the drill through. Like, we just added it to the next version of SQL Server. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's not the same functionality. It's a different functionality to allow you to do drill through detailed rows inside of Tabular model, where you can actually see, you can determine what is going to be returned when you want to drill. So I think many of these things will also end up in Tabular at one point. But yeah.
Okay. Yeah, actually that was on my list. So we could just see that maybe both technologies are converging a little bit. They are getting closer in what they can perform, what functionality you can, let's say, build easily. but there will still be a distinction in the future. It won't be, as you said, not a one-to-one replacement.
No, like for example, we will never do. I shouldn't say never because, but like one of the hardest things, is doing any hierarchical work in Tabular, and this is by design because as soon as you start introducing hierarchical work, you're back to attribute relationships in multidimensional, and this is what makes multidimensional so hard. So bringing that over into Tabular, like you kind of defeat the purpose. So those are some of the things that we have to really do a find. Maybe we come up with something that is easy and kind of can do the same thing, but probably not. Yeah. And yeah, so those are some of the interesting things that. And planning, I don't think we'll do the planning in the same form or shape anytime soon in Tabular. The financial one that seems more interesting because that's a very common scenario. And again, from a Microsoft standpoint, we want to, like, if someone introduces, like, even for Power BI, having the capability to do financial reporting as easy as possible is also a benefit for them. So that team might think, okay, let's just go fix it, and let's make it in an easy form or shape, and then again, the analysis team can ship it as well. So.
Okay. Yeah. So. Thank you so much for the discussion. I think we could answer some questions that for all of us are really interesting. And thanks a lot.
Thank you.